Welcome! If you're standing right here in the vibrant district of Wanhua today, surrounded by the amazing smell of street food and all this busy city life, you're actually standing on layers of just incredible history. I'll be your historical guide today, and in this explainer, we're going to uncover the deep, pretty dramatic story of the very streets you're about to explore. Okay, let's dive into this. It is so easy to just look at the modern cafes and the bustling traffic and totally forget that this exact area is the true starting point of Taipei's development. The streets you're standing on, they trace their roots all the way back to the early 18th century. Long before the skyscrapers, this was literally the absolute center of northern Taiwan. But to really understand how it got there, we kind of have to go back to its original name.
So, long before it was called Wanhua, this whole area was known as Monga. And that name actually comes from the indigenous Katagalan people. They lived right here in the Taipei Basin and would row these small wooden canoes, which were called banka in their language, up and down the Tamsui River. When early Han Chinese settlers arrived, they gathered down by the river to trade things, mostly sweet potatoes, with the indigenous tribes. The settlers simply heard the sound of the word banka and translated it into the Taiwanese word banka, or manga. In fact, that exact trading spot, originally known as Sweet Potato Street, is now Guiyang Street. It's officially Taipei's oldest street.
Thanks to its absolutely perfect location on the Tamsui River, Monga grew incredibly fast. By the 18th and 19th centuries, it had really hit its golden age. There was actually a famous historical saying in Taiwan at the time, 1 Fu, 2 Lu, 3 Monga. Basically, this meant that Monga was the third most prosperous and powerful port city in all of Taiwan, right behind Tainan and Lukang. I mean, wealth was just pouring in, ships were constantly docking, the city was absolutely thriving. But, who was actually running the show?
Section 1. The Jiao Merchants, Monga's powerful guilds. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that Monga wasn't ruled by normal politicians or like a strong local government. It was completely run by the Jiao merchants. The absolute easiest way to understand the Jiao is to just think of them as modern megacorporations. I mean, they controlled absolutely everything. They managed all the imports and exports on the river. They organized their own powerful private armies. They funded the major temples like the famous Longshan Temple, and they even built the public roads. Honestly, if you lived in Monga during the Qing dynasty, the Jiao merchants controlled your trade, your physical protection, and your faith. The whole shebang.
And well, this clearly shows where the trouble began. You didn't just have one megacorporation. You had two massive rival ones forced to share a very crowded port. On one side, you had the top Jiao, made up of Sanyu people based over at the mighty Longshan Temple trading with Guangzhou. On the other side, you had the bottom Jiao, the Tong'an people living just down the road in Bajia village trading with Xiamen. As the port got busier and busier, the space for ships got much tighter. Both of these groups desperately wanted total control over the super valuable docking rights along the river. So the tension had been building for years.
Section 2. The 1853 Jiao Conflict, the Tingsha Turf War. So that tension? It finally exploded in 1853 into a full-scale battle for total control. The top Jiao had a larger army and basically wanted to wipe out the bottom Jiao completely. But they faced a massive tactical problem. To get to the bottom Jiao's base, their path was entirely blocked by a huge muddy swamp and a neutral temple, the Xingshu Temple. Put yourself in their shoes for a second. How do you launch a surprise army across a swamp and straight through someone else's sacred temple?
Well, the top Jiao came up with a pretty cruel but incredibly clever plan. Step 1. They forced the neutral temple owners to let them borrow a path, promising they'd rebuild it later. Step 2. To actually clear the way for their troops and completely bypass that swamp, they simply burned the temple to the ground. Step 3. They stormed right through the ashes and launched a devastating sneak attack directly onto the bottom Jiao. And the sneak attack totally worked. Defeated and desperate, the bottom Jiao were forced to abandon Monga completely. But as they literally fled north for their lives, they made absolutely sure to carry one crucial thing with them: their sacred guardian statue, the Sha-Hai city god. They rescued their god from the flames and carried it up the river to start over. Let's move to and see how this builds. Section 3. The Rise of Da Cheng. The losers win the future. Now, the victors of the war thought they had secured their wealth forever. But history always has a different plan, doesn't it? The top Jiao won the war and kept Monga, but soon after, the Tamsui River right there began to fill with silt and mud. Big ships literally couldn't dock anymore. Plus, the top Jiao remained very conservative and closed off. Meanwhile, the defeated losers who fled north settled in a place called Dadacheng.
Dadacheng had deep water, which was perfect for massive new foreign ships. The refugees opened their doors to the international tea trade, and soon Dadacheng exploded with wealth as the new trade center, while Monga just slowly declined. The losers actually ended up winning the future. Incredible, right?
Section 4. Modern Wanhua Today, a cultural treasure.
Which brings us right back to the streets you're walking today. How exactly did the ancient, declining port of Monga become the vibrant district we now call Wanhua? After the conflict and the port's decline in the 1880s, the area went through a pretty quiet period. But in 1920, the Japanese government stepped in to modernize the city. They noticed that the Taiwanese pronunciation Bangka sounded an awful lot like the Japanese word Monka, which means 10,000 years of prosperity. So they officially renamed the district Wanhua. From a sleepy, declining port, it began a long century of transforming into the cultural hub you see today.
Because of this incredible timeline, you aren't just walking past normal buildings today. You can physically touch this history. You can visit Longshan Temple, the very headquarters of the Tapjiao, built way back in 1738. You can walk right through the Bopilao historical block, where the architecture shows this amazing blend of Qing dynasty and Japanese modern street planning. You can see the Ximen Red House, built in 1908 in North Wanhua. And yes, you can even visit the Qingshui Temple, which was beautifully rebuilt by the community after it was tragically burned down in that 1853 sneak attack.
Ancient Monga was just a place of flat-bottomed canoes trading sweet potatoes. It grew into a fierce, wealthy port controlled by giant megacorporations, survived a massive turf war, and eventually reinvented itself into a modern cultural treasure. Every single brick, temple, and alleyway in Wanhua holds a story of ambition, survival, and rebirth. So as you step out to continue your walk through Taipei's oldest streets, I want to leave you with this question. Look closely at the walls and the temples around you. What piece of hidden history will you discover today? Have a great walk.